Now, remember how we said that our subconscious designs our movies based on previous experiences in our lives? Well, the good thing is that we have an internal movie critic that we can activate to help us to see if the quality of the movies we're running in our heads are really serving us. Because we would all agree that not all the movies that we run are good ones. And we need to take the movie critic role to review if the way that we're seeing the world is helping or preventing us from getting what we want. To make this a little clearer, I want you to consider what I call the change formula. And the change formula goes like this. Our perspective, meaning our internal movie, determines how we feel. And how we feel determines how we act. And though it is true that we should act in spite of our feelings, by far the majority of the time we act because of our feelings. And how we act determines the results we get. And the results we get determines the outcome of our life and ultimately our destiny. But how your subconscious designs your internal movie is interesting. It determines the kind of movie that it creates based on the previous experiences you've had in your life. And if your previous experiences have been positive ones, then your subconscious creates positive and empowering movies that will help you to be a better Christian. But if your previous experiences have been negative or traumatic ones, it creates horror movies in your life that become an obstacle to your relationship with God. Now, the thing that determines whether our experiences are positive or negative ones is the meaning that we put to the events in our life. Let me explain a little further. An event has absolutely no significance to us until we put meaning to it. Then it becomes an experience. For example, when I was younger, I had the unfortunate experience or event happen where I almost drowned in the pool. And that event didn't necessarily have an impact on my life until I put a meaning to it. I could have put the meaning that, wow, water is dangerous, I should stay away from it, and it could lead, and then, of course, that experience now leads me to stay away from water and be deathly afraid of water and just stay away from it as far as I can. Or I could have put the meaning to it where, wow, water is a challenge, and I'm going to meet that challenge by learning how to be the best swimmer I can possibly be. But guess what? The one I chose was that water was a challenge, so I'm going to be the best swimmer I can. And to this day, I love the water, and I love swimming in the pool. See, a meaning that I put to it created that experience that now fuels my life. And the sum of the experiences in our life eventually determine the internal movies that we run or the perspective we have on our life. If the meaning we applied to the events in our life were negative, disempowering ones, then the experiences we create and the movie that we run will work against us. And ultimately, we limp through life, mostly stuck in our lukewarm zone, powerless to change the things that are preventing us from pleasing God. But if the meaning we put to the events in our life are empowering ones, then we will create a very positive, powerful experience that will fuel us to take action to become the men and women that we know pleases God. The challenge for many of us is that many of the meanings we put to the events in our lives were not empowering ones. Also, we did it such a long time ago, we don't know what they are. And then currently we end up responding in ways to our life that are in direct conflict to what God wants for us in many areas of our life. But we have an internal movie critic that can help us identify these disempowering meanings and change them to the ones that will give us the power to create the life that we want. And how do we change the meanings of the experiences in our life? By reframing it, of course. What is a reframe? See, reframe just means that that every situation, like all meaning, is really dependent on the surroundings that it's in. For example, if you saw a picture of a woman being shoved to the ground by a random stranger on the street, how would you feel? Think about it. You'll get angry. You think, man, that man was mean. That guy's a criminal. He was rude. How dare he? But if all of a sudden you were to pan back and see that there was a piano that was falling from the sky about to hit her, and he shoved her out of the way, how would you then feel about this man? That's right. Your entire perspective or feeling about this man would change because the meaning changed. Why? Because the frame or the surroundings changed. Because meanings are context dependent. In other words, they're only dependent on the surrounding that it's in. Now, the great thing is that just by choosing to see something differently, meaning changing the context in the movie of your mind, or changing how you perceive it, all of a sudden the situation will have a different meaning. And if I have a different meaning about it, I will feel differently about it. If I feel differently about it, then I'll act differently with it. This is the biblical principle that Paul spoke about when he described his views on repentance. When he said, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Or when he said, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So then let's go into our unleashing our inner movie critic exercise. And the whole purpose behind this is understanding that changing the meanings of the events in our life and experiences in our life changes the theme of our internal movie. In other words, changes the way that our internal movie runs. So if you have a horror movie running in your head, if we change these meanings, we could turn it into a comedy. If you have drama, then we can change it to an adventure. Just by changing the meaning of these experiences in our life. So let's get started. Again, I want you to identify one situation in your life you're unsatisfied with. A situation or a belief that discourages you maybe, or something you feel sad about or feel powerless against. And I want you to ask yourself, like usual, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intensely do you feel about this belief? Now let's dig deep into this belief, okay? What is the meaning that we're putting to this belief or this situation that's discouraging us or taking away our power? So in essence, what's the meaning that's actually underlying this situation? Like that's discouraging you or taking away your power? Ask yourself, why is this situation so important to me? Answer that question. That usually is able to kind of like ferret out what the actual meaning is that you're putting to the situation. Or ask yourself this question: what does this situation mean to me? You know, that it's making me feel discouraged about it or feel unsatisfied. Then I want you now to question the quality, validity, and integrity of that meaning that's driving that unsatisfaction or the discouragement. Okay, so you've isolated it. Now we know what it is. I want you to question the quality, validity, integrity of this meaning. Ask yourself a couple questions. When did I decide that this belief was true? I mean, think about it. There was, like we said before, there was a point in your life that you didn't believe it was true. Then all of a sudden you're living that way, so it's got to be a point that you first decided that this belief was true. When did you decide that this belief was true? Is this belief true? Meaning that you're putting, or that belief system, is it true? Why is it not true? What are the reasons that this belief really isn't true? Come up with as many as you can. Answer that question. Why is this belief not true? The goal that we're trying to do is to kind of shed doubt on this belief system or this meaning. Because by shedding the doubt on it or causing us to doubt it, it's easier for us to let go of it. Why was the meaning that I chose a really bad choice for this situation? You know, in other words, that it's so bad because it's now causing me to be discouraged instead of encouraged. Why was the meaning that I chose a really bad choice for this situation? And if you didn't know, most of us choose these meanings back between the ages of 1 to 7 most of the time. And it's interesting, how would you like to know that you've been living your life based on the convictions of a 5-year-old? It was probably not the best thinking that we chose when we first chose this meaning. How is this meaning that I chose now serving me right now? It's probably not, right? It's probably making your life even harder. Okay, so now that we sort of kind of uncovered the meaning, and now we're starting to kind of like create doubt around that meaning, I want you to see the situation now from a different, more spiritual perspective, and let's give it a different meaning. I want you to ask yourself these questions. If I were in God's shoes, what would I as God say to me to help me through this situation? Put yourself in God's shoes for a second and look at yourself and talk to yourself and share your perspective on the situation. You know, as Christians, that pretty much describes our Christian life, that we're striving to change our perspective and start adapting God's perspective of the world, because then we'll get God's meanings of it. We'll feel like conviction will grow, and we'll act on our convictions. Another question to ask yourself: what positive things has come from this situation that I don't see? Maybe there's a lot of good stuff happening because of it. What is God trying to teach me through this situation? Like maybe God's trying to form something in my character. How can this situation be a really good opportunity for me? And that's a hard one, but man, if we can answer that question, it will really help us to have a completely different perspective. By going through this situation, how can I help more people who are going through similar situations? Now that you're able to, if you're able to overcome it, how can you help more people? And my favorite, after being in heaven for 10,000 years, how bad will this situation be really? Probably not very bad at all. Now, let's put a brand new meaning to it that will empower us and help us to get what we want in our spiritual life. Let's ask ourselves, what is a more empowering spiritual meaning or belief that will serve me better in this situation? And let's go ahead and find that, and let's go ahead and put it in there, in our movie, in our perspective of this situation that was originally dissatisfying for us. And then let's test it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how intensely does it feel now? How unsatisfying or discouraging does it feel? It's probably a whole lot less. You know, you can do this simple exercise every day for a week. I mean, you can every day you can identify an area. I would suggest that you do. I mean, every day identify an area of your life you're not satisfied with. Identify the limiting or deceitful belief that's causing your unsatisfying feelings. And then choose a more spiritual, more powerful meaning. And it's a really phenomenal exercise that I think you will notice will continuously help you to totally feel differently and create a new movie in your mind and help you act the way you want to act with a life that glorifies God.